All right, so today I wanted to talk about this article out of the CBC titled Liberal Delegates Endorse a UBI, Reject Capital Gain Tax Hike. So let's talk a little bit about it here. Liberal delegates to the party's political convention have overwhelmingly endorsed a resolution calling for the establishment of a UBI in Canada while rejecting a call to hike the capital gains tax by a vote of 77% Liberal members on hand for the policy. Plenary today backed a call to permanently implement an income program similar to the CERB, which kept millions of people afloat with monthly checks during the first wave of the pandemic. That's partially true. A lot of people lost their house, lost their businesses. A couple $1,000s isn't enough to keep things going. But anyway, with 8.7% of Canadians living below the poverty line and thousands more struggling to make ends meet, backers of this policy say a UBI would ensure that communities at risk are able to feel financially secure. Given the success of the CURB program, again, that's highly opinionated if you ask me, but nonetheless, a UBI will assist seniors and low-income Canadians maintain an adequate standard of living regardless of working standards. Again, that's again very opinionated. I'm gonna get into that. Speaking to delegates assembled online, Alex Spears of the Young Canadians of Canada said the UBI would ensure the country's strong and robust social safety net is adapted to the 21st century, adding that a program to send checks to all families is completely consistent with our values as a party. He said the program would put more cash in the hands of working Canadians and families and could lift millions out of poverty. UBI is not a silver bullet, and it ought to be done in conjunction with many other progressive policies, but is a critical step, he said. Again, so they say, oh, would a UBI work? I think I'm obviously gonna get into that. The article is pretty long. I'm not gonna read it anymore because I don't want to make this too long. Um, so to answer the question, obviously, would a UBI work? Well, I mean, for starters, it completely depends upon your question of work. The reason why leftists view a UBI as quote unquote working, because in their mind it does. But the problem is that that's not the point of a UBI, right? The point of a UBI would be to end, or at the very least, reduce poverty. But would it actually do that? Well, no, it wouldn't, right? Um, and this is the thing when it comes to a UBI, right? Let's just be very honest about this too. The big problem when it comes to a UBI is not, before you can even have the debate of would it work, you first need to have the conversation of how do you pay for it, right? I see numbers, I think it's around, I mean, the CERB and all these income support programs, I think it was like 150 to 200 billion dollars. I think a UBI they said would be like 70 or 80 billion, and again, that's probably a low end estimate too. You have to keep that in mind. Um, so the question that begs the question, how do you pay for it? Right now, again, the socialist types and the people who tend to support this always come back at you with, oh, wealth tax, right? Tax the rich. But their own estimates show that a wealth tax would generate nowhere near enough to pay for that. So how else are you going to do it? And here's the problem: there's no amount of there's no tax increase. There's no amount of increasing taxes that's going to pay for this. So anyone who says, "Oh, we can pay for it just by raising this tax or that tax," they're a complete zealot instantly, right? Because they haven't thought this through at all, right? The reality behind people who support this, you kind of have different groups of people. You have um, the people who stand to gain are just selfish people, right? This is why they always accuse rich people of being selfish, which a lot of them are. But on average, rich people are no more selfish than the average person because, again, 99% of people, if they were making millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars a year, they wouldn't want to pay more taxes, especially when you're looking at, Canada's taxes or somewhere like California's taxes, right? So again, when I hear people say, "Oh, it's the right thing to do," or all this stuff, it's like 95% of you, if you were in these people's position, you would be acting in the exact same way they are, right? It's very easy to say, oh, rich people should pay more in taxes when you're not actually in their position. And again, that brings up the other problem too when it comes to taxing the rich more, is that it doesn't actually achieve what they want to achieve, for the simple reason that the only way that taxing the rich more makes any sense is if you can I mean, number one, we have to answer all the questions that I've already pointed out, which isn't going to happen. But even if you want to say that it is going to happen, the other big question that needs to be answered is the government can the government spend money in a more efficient way? Can they allocate resources in a more efficient way than someone like Elon Musk can? And the answer to that is no. It's not even close, right? It's not even close. And this comes back to the fact that, again, most people are just so economically illiterate, it's not even funny, right? Again, this is just basic economics too. Again, how many people out there think that if you think that you can endlessly raise taxes and the government will collect revenue in proportion to which how much more in the percentage of taxes they're raising, right? They think that if you raise taxes 10% on the rich, that you're going to get 10% more taxes from the rich. That's not how reality works. And this is one of the first things you learn about economics. Again, I've taken these courses. This is one of the first things you learn. It's the Laffer curve, and there's a lot of other stuff as well, but the Laffer curve is the basic idea behind it, that there comes a point to where if you raise taxes, there's a tipping point, right? There's an equilibrium point to where any amount of increased taxes above wherever the percentage is, you actually start to get less revenue, right? So this is one thing that the progressives absolutely get wrong, and every single economist agrees with this, even the more Keynesian ones. Now, the Keynesian ones would say the tipping point's higher than the ones that actually have functioning brains, but everyone agrees on this. When you hear people say, "Oh, we need 80-90% marginal taxes on the top brackets or anything above whatever the number the socialists are coming up with these days," those people have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and they're completely economically illiterate, right? So again, would a UBI work? Absolutely not, right? Absolutely. What would happen if the government implemented a UBI? Let's just go over it because it's very easy to figure this stuff out. What would happen is the government would implement it. They'd probably raise taxes in some way, whether it's income taxes, whether it's corporate taxes, whether it's capital gains. I mean, they say they don't want to do that, but they would raise taxes in some way. I'd be very surprised if they didn't do it, because that would give people the illusion that that's how they're going to pay for it. Now, the reality is that would pay for like maybe 10% of it, and the rest of it would be paid for through debt, right? So what happens then? The government's just going to create money out of thin air. What does that do? It's going to cause inflation, right? So you're giving people $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever it is. But what ends up happening? Things just get more expensive to make up for the difference, right? So all of a sudden you give people $2,000 a month, but $2,000 a month can buy you, 5% less per year, right? Because again, anyone who actually pays attention knows the official inflation rate's more than what the government says. And if they implemented a UBI, it would even be that much more, right? So again, this is just basic. You don't even need to understand economics. It's just basic common sense, right? It should be just basic common sense. So again, a lot of people. So again, like I say, what would happen is that again, $2,000 a month would be meaningless, right? It would be meaningless. Earning $2,000 a month would be the same as earning like $1,000 a month prior to the UBI going in, right? And that, you can't live off that much, right? So what would happen is basically the rate at which the poverty line would just go up, right? These people would still be living in poverty. And again, what would and this is why things would get really bad, I think, too, is that, well, eventually things would get really bad. Um, it wouldn't fix the problem, right? It absolutely wouldn't fix the problem. So what the government would probably do is they'd push for more rent control, that kind of stuff, which only in the long run only drives the cost of housing up, which would just create more problems. They'd probably raise taxes, which again, that won't fix the problem. That's just a band-aid on a gaping wound. And at the end of the day, the problem would just get worse and worse and worse and worse until the entire system collapses. Again, that's assuming they go through with it and they actually keep going through with it, but that's something that will happen, right? There's no question about it. So the last thing to ask, now that we've debunked the idea, I've done it a lot before, but people are probably wondering, well, okay, if it would be such a disaster, why do people want it? And this is very easy to answer. I mean, most people should know this, but for the ones who don't, again, it's very easy. The government wants to buy votes, right? If you're a government these days, you can get elected in two ways, right? You can actually put in the hard work, the grunt work. The problem with that is that you risk alienating people. Basically, whatever you do these days, you're going to alienate someone, right? Or you can just promise people free stuff. Promising people free stuff has been what has worked the best lately. I mean, that's basically how governments are getting elected these days. It's not actually doing a good job. It's promising people free stuff. So, and why do the people want it? Well, again, if you're making 15 bucks an hour, why in the world would you want to work for that money if the government can just cut you a check for that much every month, right? And again, most of these people aren't intelligent enough to recognize that it's not going to work out in the long run, right? Because if you're, you know, above, if you're not in your teens or your 20s and you're still making minimum wage, okay, you got some serious issues, right? Either something's gone seriously wrong in your life or you're just not very intelligent, to say the least, right? I mean, for most people, right? There's outliers, but again, for 99% of people, that's what it is. So again, if you're not very intelligent, well, of course, again, if you're not smart enough to, basically the biggest, basically the definition of intelligence pretty much is the ability to defer gratification, right? And the less you defer gratification, the less you care about the future, right? So it's just basic when you think about it from that point of view, right? It's just very basic, right? And it lines up perfectly too in that the left wing parties, the people who vote for these left wing parties are the same people that would support it. So again, it all makes sense at the end of the day, right? But um, anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.